Hi, my name is Susan Kudalakis, and I'm Senior Marketing Manager here at Progress. Today, we'll be discussing a very important component to any data strategy, data connectivity, featuring another Progress product, Progress DataDirect. So let's start by quickly introducing you to today's speakers. I am joined by Todd Wright and Dennis Bennett. Todd leads global product marketing for Progress DataDirect Solutions. He works closely with the product management and sales organizations to create and promote materials that are relevant and valuable to Progress customers. He is instrumental in developing customer relationships and creating strategic marketing plans that drive awareness, consideration, education, and demand for Progress. Dennis Bennett has over 20 years of experience in working with companies to help solve their data connectivity challenges. In the past, he's worked as an application developer, DBA, and QA engineer. At Progress, he is principal sales engineer for the data connectivity and integration products. I'm really excited to have both Todd and Dennis with us today, so now I'll turn it over to them to start the discussion.
All right, thanks, Susan, and hello, everyone. This is Todd Wright, as mentioned. And on the webcast today, we're going to mix it up a little bit from what we normally do, and we're going to have more of a conversational type of format. To help me with this endeavor, welcome again to Dennis Bennett. As Susan mentioned, Dennis has decades of field experience working with leading companies, include I believe close to 2 decades with Progress. So it's really safe to say Dennis has a wealth of information he's able to share today. And I'm really going to pick his brain on all things DataDirect, and in particular, our work with independent software vendors that embed our data connectivity. So welcome again, Dennis. And if you're ready, let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right. When looking, Dennis, when looking at the DataDirect webpage, it really is a who's who of leading analytics and business intelligence providers, and really as well other software vendors that are leaders in their respective space. And I was wondering, Dennis, can you give us a little insight into some of the use cases and how DataDirect has helped these independent software vendors in some of their initiatives with data connectivity?
Yeah, like you said, it is quite a list of some very serious companies that we get to work with. Very proud of the relationship we have with those guys. And as you mentioned, a lot of them are business intelligence tools. Others are data integration products, data governance, extract, transformation, and load (ETL) tools. Basically, any tool that needs data, we can add value to that. Typically, for a vendor product, software vendor product that deals with data, the more connectivity options they can offer their users and prospects, the more value they're going to bring to the table. And that's our goal, is to help their initiatives and their products, be more valuable, be more sticky, get more traction in the marketplace. These vendors, they want to be able to say yes when a prospect comes to them with some data connectivity requirements. And so that's where we kind of come into it. We've been doing this for a long time. We have relationships with software vendors that go back, decades, actually. Initially, we were in the space around relational databases, and we did things like we stuck really closely to the standards. Initially ODBC, later JDBC, ADO.NET, today REST sources. But we find we bring value in that way by sticking to the standards, and just make it easier for a software vendor to support multiple different data sources as much as possible with a single code path. And we have a lot of things we've done over the years to make that possible. So as I said, it was relational to begin with, but more recently, and I say recently, it's 10 years now, but we've added some of the big data sources, and things like Hive, things like Spark, Impala. Some of these were similar to relational databases, and some of them are very, very different. And things like Hive is a lot like a relational database, but something like a MongoDB really couldn't be more different than a relational database, in that there's no schema, rather than relational data. It's documents, and often very complex documents. And even after that, with REST APIs that SaaS applications, software as a service applications use, introduces similar complexity to Mongo. So, but
Yeah,
the goal,
yeah.
sorry, is the goal is to make these things look and behave in a standardized fashion, similar to a relational database, just to make life easier for the vendors out there.
That's interesting. In the 2 years that I've been with Progress DataDirect, to your point, one thing that I've noticed the most is the amount of new data sources that we have introduced that aren't really relational databases. Really going for the unstructured and social media, and I think it's really valuable, to your points, to be able to have a lot of different data sources that they can feed into their BI and analytics programs. So yeah, it's great. And you
Yeah,
had
to
also,
that,
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead. Sorry.
to that point, initially in the early days of relational databases, there was a number of different ones out there, and there was winners and losers, and it really settled down to, 3 to 5 kind of big players, and it stayed like that for a while. But like, as you say, today, that is not the case. We see new sources springing up all the time, and they're very different, and they're very different from relational. So yeah, it's a brave new world out there, and it's very different than how things used to be.
Yep, absolutely. And you had mentioned one thing that piqued my interest. You had mentioned the word options. And we all know that there's a lot of options out in the market. And one question we get at DataDirect fairly often from independent software vendors is, what about the option of just having our users buy their data connectivity separately, as opposed to us embedding it in our platform? What are your thoughts really regarding that question? And what benefits have our ISV partners realized by going the embedded route, as opposed to, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, just go out and find your own connectivity?
Yeah. Ultimately, it just comes down to the user experience, which is going to be easier, less friction for the users, everything in the box, or do they need to go out after they, purchase the software vendor's product? Do they need to go out and, do some other things? And really, we kind of liken it to, batteries included. If you think about, if you have young kids and you buy toys that require batteries, and if you forget the batteries on Christmas morning, the experience is not a good one, right? So
lots of tears. Yeah.
Same sort of thing, right? We try to make it where it's just easier. And another, we talked about some trends before. One trend is software vendors are targeting less technical audiences, not really going for the IT department anymore. They go for, power users who know their data, but maybe they don't know databases. They don't know, some of the tooling around it. These people, you make it difficult for them. You want to enable them to do the work. They know the data, but they may not know, how to go out there and find the right database driver for their needs. And it's really just frustrating. So it's just trying to make it easier, a better experience, less friction. And the other thing is, it's, I talked about after the sale, but as far as proof of concepts go, you want to make that easy. You don't want to, we definitely see users, if they download a product and it doesn't work easily, there's a lot of other choices out there. They'll just kind of move it aside and try the next one, and hopefully have a better experience. So anything we can do to make that better for our software vendor partners, to make the POC go well, and less kind of fallout on that, is to everyone's benefit.
Yep, absolutely agree. And so you had a nice segue again. You had talked a little bit about our software. Let's go a little bit deeper into the actual software from DataDirect. And really, for our audience, what are some of the connectivity options available to independent software vendors from DataDirect? I know from a marketing perspective, and of course I work at DataDirect, I see things like our full catalog, something called hybrid data pipeline, autonomous REST connector, open access. For the benefit of our audience, can you go a little bit into what those entail and what are some of the areas that our partners, our ISV partners, are really seeking out from DataDirect at this point?
Yeah, so you asked, what's out there, in our catalog of connectors and products, and what leads, us to pick one versus the other. It really is a question of understanding the use case, what the software vendor wants to enable for their prospects and customers, and based on that, it's often pretty clear what the best path is. Sometimes there's a couple different ways, and it's a little more nuanced, and we kind of try to understand it better. But to begin with, hybrid data pipeline, I might call it HDP for short. That one is actually more than a driver. A lot of the other ones are, straight connectivity. HDP is more of a data hub or a gateway with embedded connectivity to 40 or more data sources. And that connectivity is actually extensible. So, if what we have in the box for, the relational databases, the big data, the software as a service applications, if you don't see what is necessary, is needed there, we can actually use other drivers to do it. So it's very flexible that way. HDP, it supports out of the box multiple tenancies, multiple tenants. It's very, very granular user roles can be set up, things like that. It has strong auditing capabilities. So what we see for software vendors in this case, one major use case is someone with a software as a service application that they have data behind it, maybe a data warehouse that they want to give to their customers for reporting. Basically, customers want to run their own BI tools against their own data, even though it's in the cloud, behind the SaaS application. With hybrid data pipeline, it's very easy to securely share your data and do it in a multi-tenant fashion, and give people access to it. And that access is either ODBC, JDBC, or OData, which is a REST kind of variant. So with those three protocols, basically any BI tool is available to be used at that. So that's a major use case we see. Another one, and again, this is usually a software as a service vendor in the cloud, but sometimes customers have data that they want, in the cloud, but sometimes certain data is, they want to keep it on-prem. They don't want to upload it. So, but they still maybe want to be able to use it in the application, maybe report on it. Hybrid Data Pipeline has a feature called the on-premises connector, which enables SaaS vendors to be able to, with HDP, with Hybrid Data Pipeline and the on-premises connector, be able to access customers' data that is behind a firewall without having to open up a VPN or anything like that. So that's a pretty common use case. Those are some of the major ones we see for Hybrid Data Pipeline. Another thing we see with the kind of onslaught of new data sources, one thing most of them have in common, pretty much close to all of them, is that they expose data through a REST API. And so, a number of years now, probably 4 coming up on 5 years, we thought that if we could build a universal REST driver, ODBC or JDBC SQL access to REST, that was going to fit the bill for a lot of software vendor partners who needed access to these sources and didn't want to, build a custom REST connector for each. Certainly, people can do that. That's what it's made for, but everything, it's a one-off custom process. So the idea of ARC, the Autonomous REST Connector, is it's not an SDK. It's really just a low-touch process using our composer to set up the driver to be able to access different REST sources. And what that gives is software vendors, it just greatly expands the data access options that they have. We've built a bunch of REST models for ARC already. We have over 50 of those pre-built. And those are certainly, if you use the Autonomous REST Connector, they're all available to you. And then if you have something that's maybe more proprietary or more niche, you can use the Autonomous REST Connector with the composer to configure your own. if we already have a commercial driver built for the API, the source you want, say Microsoft Dynamics 365 or SAP S/4HANA, you're going to be well served just taking the driver that we already have. And really the last one I would highlight is the Open Access SDK Software Developer Kit. That would be in the case, maybe it's a completely proprietary API and it's not REST, and you could use open access for that. An interesting kind of trend we're seeing lately, probably over the last 3 years, is we're seeing a lot of data security use cases that leverage the open access SDK. What they do in that case is they take an existing, often JDBC driver, for a database, let's say Oracle or SQL Server, and they want to add some kind of role-based access control or maybe data masking. In this way, when a user logs in using the Open Access SDK and the existing driver that's already there, you're able to see who the user is, see what kind of data entitlements that they should have access to, and then from there go ahead and do things like row level security to limit the data they can see, or data masking of sensitive data. So that's one we're seeing a lot of lately. But to your original question, really there's a bunch of different tools that we have, and it really, typically, depending on the use case, it's pretty clear which one is the one that's going to be the right fit.
That makes sense. So at the end, you had mentioned security, and I think everyone, you and I know, and everyone on this call knows that privacy and security is becoming more of an important topic by the day. We have the GDPR out of Europe, HIPAA, of course, California data laws. When you're asked by customers, independent software vendors, or just companies in direct about the data privacy laws that are out there and how data connectivity from DataDirect fits into all that, what are some of the things that you say to them to really set their mind at ease that more data, more access, obviously, to data is important, but it does open it up to security and privacy concerns. What if you could expand a little bit on that, and how we at DataDirect really put our customers' minds and prospect minds at ease when it comes to that?
Yeah, so at DataDirect, we have a strong focus on security, and that goes back decades again. Obviously, just giving data access and leaving vulnerabilities out there does nobody any favors. So one thing we do is with the drivers, we actually provide a statement of quality, which reports on some of the internal scanning that we do of our source code. We use other services to discover any kind of vulnerabilities. We do use some third-party products within our drivers, and we are always checking to make sure that there are not any kind of vulnerabilities in this. In that statement of quality, we'll also call out all the third-party products that could be included in the driver, and what level release level they're at. We do antivirus scanning to make sure that once it's packaged, nothing like that is introduced. And then another concern for software vendors is that we don't have any kind of software in there that breaks some kind of license restriction, like a GPL or an AGPL or something like that. We don't want to, because if we did that, the customer, the software vendors themselves would at that point be concerned that they would also be out of compliance. So again, there's a lot of focus on security. We have some service level objectives on our website that talk about the different levels of vulnerability and how quickly we're going to get them remediated. We have on the website some information on our SOC 2 certifications. We have some ISO ones. All of these things are really designed to make the customer, our software vendors, comfortable that we are a good partner to work with on this.
Yeah, a lot of transparency. That's one thing that I've been happy in my time here at DataDirect. We're really transparent about what we try to do with security. Now that we've dived a little bit into the software, it really begs one to ask, at least I have the question, why DataDirect? I think we all know every industry and every company that sells anything, customers have options. And with that said, why have so many independent software vendors, ISVs, partner with DataDirect?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really, our business is data connectivity, and the partnerships with other software vendors is a major portion of the DataDirect business. We sell directly to end users, companies, but most of what we do is through other software vendors where they embed our technology. So we strive to be excellent partners to these people, and we do a good job of it. We've been doing it for a long time. We've learned what works, with people, and we're able to partner, all the way from the smallest startups to the largest companies, like the IBMs and Oracles. And so the flexibility to be able to have a good partnership with, the gamut, the full, range of software vendor sizes. Another thing to look at is some of our partnerships actually do go back decades. So obviously, if they weren't happy, they would have been long gone. And even some of these, if you look at some of them, these companies are smaller, or sometimes, actually small. And today, they've grown to the point where, everyone knows them. So it's been a good partnership, where we provide our, core competency, which is connectivity, and allows the database vendor, or not database vendor, the software providers themselves to stick to theirs. They, basically do what makes their product great, and understand that we will give them connectivity to, all the sources they need. Another thing which we haven't talked about yet, but is a differentiator, is this kind of support our partners get from Progress DataDirect. I've worked with our support team, and I've been very impressed with the work they do, and even things like I've seen them continue to work a problem even after it's been clear that the problem is not with the driver, it's with some other factor. They don't basically just wash their hands and say, point the finger somewhere else. So, and that's just another part of being a good partner. Maybe the last thing I would bring up on that is, as a partner, we want to hear what the software vendors our partners want, as far as the roadmap. What is something that's important to them? What would, help them, do better? Because ultimately, anything that improves the, the traction that our partners get is all good for us. So, we want to work together on things like, the direction where we are going with our connectivity applications.
Yep, meet their needs. Well, Dennis, thanks for all of that. And one final question before I open up the lines for audience questions. All the questions have not ended yet. Take us through a little bit of the process of becoming a partner of DataDirect's. If you're an independent software vendor out there, what can one expect? Is there a proof of concept that is a normal process, consulting services that they need to go through? And what are some of the time frames, if you can recall, if there is an average time frame, a partner should be able to get up and going with DataDirect and embedded connectivity within their software stack?
Yeah, so like you said, we would expect there to be some kind of technical proof of concept. Obviously people want to do due diligence and make sure it's going to fit their needs. They wouldn't, test absolutely everything they need, but they would pick, some major features that are important just to verify and validate that it does perform, and, have the functionality that they need. Through that process, we have a dedicated pre-sales team to provide free technical support. no kind of, you wouldn't have to pay for consulting services on that. As far as the length of time, that's going to vary. Some of the products, we listed before will have a longer sales cycles than others. There may be more complexity to the setup and what needs to be tested and validated. For example, the open access SDK, since there's actually code being written, that would be a little bit longer of a proof of concept and so forth. Hybrid data pipeline, it's not really coding, but there's more setup. Since it's more of a server, you would probably set up, for a production-like test, a couple of servers behind a load balancer. You test some connectivity to different data sources. So, there's multiple pieces to that. One thing is interesting is the autonomous REST connector. That one actually can be surprisingly quick, where you just kind of point it at a REST API and in a very short time, and I mean by like an hour or less sometimes, depending on the number of REST endpoints that you want to map, you can actually be pulling back data via SQL. So that one is actually kind of cool to see. And the same thing for the the commercial off-the-shelf drivers that we have, for like SQL Server or Dynamics 365 or some of the SAP ones. That one really is just setting up an environment and doing some testing and perhaps performance testing depending. So again, that could be a fairly quick one. And a lot of times that's driven by, the software vendor's needs. I've definitely been involved with some even earlier this year where they had a pressing need to get something out the door. And they were hitting some issues with someone else's driver. And, we worked quickly to get them going and, even, did some things that were, a little more difficult to make sure that they could fully test everything and be comfortable in a very short time frame. While the technical testing is going on in parallel, there'll be commercial, discussions around the contract itself. We've been partnering with software vendors for many years, and we're actually very flexible on how we can work together. We'll have discussions to understand, how the software vendor wants to go to market, and we'll align ourselves to that. If they count, users, if they count servers or things like that, we will align our contract to go with that. We're not going to have them counting new metrics that they're not currently monitoring. We kind of joke the tail doesn't wag the dog. Basically, we're going to align with how our partners go to market on that. And so again, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of times these things start small. We kind of have some starter packs for people, and they'll grow as the company and as the product grows. And a lot of them will have enterprise license agreements, but that's over time. That's not immediately. Usually it's more fenced, just so there's not, so people are comfortable, that it's going to align with, how they're going to go. Especially with a new product, it's difficult to know, how much, traction they'll get in the market.
Sure,
but
sure.
it's flexible, and that's not a difficult thing. And then after that, assuming that we come to an agreement, there's an onboarding process to introduce the new partner to Progress, showing them how to get a Progress ID, how to work with support, how to get access to our partner link portal, how to sign up for our customer validation program. That's, I hadn't mentioned that before, but that's something for customers where they can get early access to software kind of preview. And also sometimes we'll do sessions where we'll cover, some new functionality coming, things like that. So that's definitely something I recommend people, new customers get involved with, and even things like signing up for Progress Alert notifications. So beyond that, we'll often assign a customer success manager to make sure the new partner, gets off to a successful quick start, doesn't waste time. And ultimately, the goal is to establish, a long-term, mutually beneficial partnership that allows us both to be successful.
Dennis, that was great and very thorough. I think our audience members would agree that you had some really great answers to some of the questions that I posed. At this point, we have several questions from our audience in the queue. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, this was an encore presentation that we did, so don't be alarmed by the different outfits that we have on now. And I have a few hundred more new gray hairs since the last presentation. But Dennis, we have some questions from our audience today. Looking at some of the questions, it looks like you did answer a few of them during our Q&A that we had. But maybe as a recap, we can still go over them. And if there's any follow-up questions of that, we can always take those. So without further ado, let's jump into audience questions. Number one, what is the normal process of embedding DataDirect into a vendor's product? And how long does it usually take? I know we covered that, but maybe a quick recap would be wonderful.
Yeah, and it's going to vary depending on which product. Some of the on-premise products it's going to probably be a little bit quicker or a little bit different, at least too. We have a partner distribution guide. There is a branding and locking process, and these processes allow a software vendor the ability to change the driver name, to lock it for use with their application only, change any driver messages so they'll reflect their company and their application name rather than saying Progress DataDirect. Basically, and then they would need to modify their installation processes to include the branded DataDirect drivers. For a product like Hybrid Data Pipeline, we mentioned that's more server-based. Often that is hosted by the software vendor. There is a white labeling capability so that the partner can customize it, so the UI will reflect their product. It's also common to not expose the Hybrid Data Pipeline UI itself and instead use the administrative and management APIs to control everything. And as we said, we do, for new OEM customers, we'll usually provide a customer success manager to get them through the process, answer any questions about this, for the first few months, just to make sure they get off to a good start. So.
I think you made a good point about a vendor or a customer could have their own logo within the data connectivity. They could have their own logo within their software. I worked at a company before Progress DataDirect where we embedded DataDirect, and customers had no idea that they were getting it from us, but they were still getting the same benefit of working with that particular vendor's software and the data connectivity from us. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. This is a good question. Is it possible to add additional connectors when needed to our account? So they've already embedded Progress DataDirect, and now they have some additional needs that their customers are asking them about. How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so that's kind of more contractual than technical. So it's not officially my area, though I am, somewhat familiar with it. Usually we recommend people who know ahead of time they're going to need multiple connectivity to multiple sources. Usually we try to get them all included in the initial kind of contract, initial agreement. It's just best that way. But if for some reason something comes up later, we're certainly, flexible to modify, do it. It's just, not quite as quick process. So we really encourage people to, ask for anything they think they're going to need. And, and it's to our benefit for our ISV partners, software vendor partners, to, use our products as much as possible. So it's not like it's going to typically add, a lot of cost to it. It's, it's to our benefit for these products to be used, and we try to make that easy.
Yep, absolutely. Another one we have here, how do you determine which new data connectors to support? I can jump on that one real quick. More than anything, and Dennis, I think you'll agree with me, it comes from customer feedback. If our customers are mentioning a particular data source a lot, we listen. and we'll also listen to the market, listen to analysts. What are the, for lack of a better term, what are the new hot data sources that people might be looking into? For example, we now support Microsoft Fabric Data Warehouse, and that came directly from our customers in the OEM space. Dennis, anything to add to that one? Or?
No, that's really good. Yeah, a lot of it comes from our product marketing team talking to our OEM partners and see what sources, first of all, that they're currently using and which ones are important to them. And even more, like you're saying, what are they hearing requests for? We also, annually we do a survey to our customers and just to others that we've, have in our database, just to see like a data source kind of a survey to see what they're using, what they want to use, and what coming down is going to be important to them. So yeah, you're right. It's mostly external. So
it's probably something I should have mentioned, considering I run that survey. But thank you for bringing that up, Dennis. Yeah. We have one more question. It was mentioned that ARC models. You mentioned ARC models in your talk. Can you give a little bit more as far as details on what these are and how they could help?
They would help. Yeah. So Autonomous REST Connector, it's easier to say ARC. I mentioned it basically gives you the ability to treat a REST endpoints as if it was a relational database. And to do that, we need to use the ARC Composer to map these different REST endpoints, and that allows us to, understand where the endpoint is, what the authentication is, what the data coming back will look like. And the ARC Composer will, allow you to do that. But in some cases, we see that there are, a number of kind of popular REST sources, typically software as a service, REST services. And what we've done in this case is we've kind of pre-built a starting point or a template to kind of get some of the more popular REST endpoints for these SaaS services pre-mapped. Definitely just a starting point. In some cases, you may have different endpoints than we do, and so forth. But it is a good starting point, and again, it helps the customer to be more productive and get a quicker start. So, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dennis, I think we're at the end of the questions. You answered quite a few from the presentation and customer questions, and I appreciate your help there. And to everyone on the webcast today, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate your questions and looking at Progress DataDirect. As always, this will, of course, there's a car alarm in my background now, but we will have this, this is recorded and it will be sent to everybody that attended this and registered. And if you have any follow-up questions after this webinar or any time in the future, please let us know. We're always available and we will look forward to answering your questions and being of help. And with that, we conclude this webinar. And once again, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.